And now a warm welcome to Rabbi Ronen Neuwirth, who will guide us through this week's Torah portion. Thanks so much for coming in.
Thank you for inviting me.
So to begin, tell us about this weekly Parsha.
So it's interesting because this Parsha is actually a long speech of Moshe Rabbeinu, like most of the book of the Torah Sefer Dvarim. And the Parsha speaks mainly about preparation towards entering the land of Israel. Moshe Rabbeinu from the beginning is describing the essence and the virtue of this special land, the fruits and the flowing rivers, and but also at the very same time he gives us some warnings about the dangers that might happen if we will forget the past, if we will forget where we came from. We might forget our future, and even more so towards the end of the Parsha, there's a second segment which we recite every day in our prayers from Kriyat Shema. This is part of the covenant, that if you will listen to my commandments, the land will flourish and you will be here, and if God forbid, you will stop listening to my commandments, you will exile, which unfortunately we've seen in our history. Now we are back, thanks God, but this is something we've seen in history. So in a sense, this weekly portion, the Parsha, is a very quick overview of Jewish history, of the past, of the present, and the future.
So what kind of message does this Parsha send to us right now? So
obviously, like in every Parsha, there are a few layers of messages. Maybe let's begin with the most basic and fundamental and initial one. It's interesting because Moshe Rabbeinu in his speech is mentioning the manna, the heavenly bread that we've eaten in the desert for 40 years. Just to remind everyone, that was the way God provided them with food every single day. They got this heavenly bread that came from above, like kind of rain, and there was never any lack. Each one had exactly and precisely how much he or she needed, and whatever was left over just melted. And that was the experience of 4 years. What is fascinating, as opposed to the original description of that the Torah was using for, like in the book of Exodus, for the man from the heavenly bread, that it was delicious and very tasty, and everyone could have tasted whatever they've imagined. In this weekly portion, Moshe Rabbeinu is giving a whole different explanation. He calls this man, this heavenly bread, the bread of affliction. That God afflicted you and He brought you to hunger, and He fed you with the man. And this is fascinating. Like why this is a bread of hunger? It's supposed to be everyone had exactly what they needed. But the basic explanation is very simple. In the desert, they had what they needed every single day. But when they went to sleep, they did not have anything in the bank account, no savings, nothing. They went to sleep with an empty fridge, with no food for tomorrow. They had to wait every single day for the food to be provided. It's a huge test of faith, daily faith, in the divine presence in God that is protecting them. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the people, now you're about to enter the land of Israel. And there, as opposed to the desert, you will have everything you want. It's a flourishing land. You'll have fruits and vegetables and flowing rivers, everything. And you'll build houses and cities and malls, and you'll develop one of the startup nation. But the fear that you might forget. Don't forget where you came from. Because if you'll forget where you came from, you'll forget your destiny, your final destination in the future. And therefore, you should remember this affliction of the man, which reminded you every single day that everything that you have is actually miraculous. It's from God, it's from heaven. Because here, you'll build the land in your own hands. You'll have the army, you'll defend yourself, develop the economy, the state, everything, high-tech industry. And you might forget what brought you to that miracle. Just 70 years ago, we were in ashes, in Auschwitz, in Treblinka. Thanks God, 70 years later, one of the most developed countries in the world. But if we forget the past, what we went through, we'll forget what's our future, where our future is supposed to be. And I believe this is the essence of the Parsha. Therefore, one of the commandments we have in a Parsha is the commandment of Birkat HaMazon, meaning blessing after we're eating food. And the reason for blessing is not because God needs us to bless Him. It's for us. It's a reminder. So we will be reminded every single day where everything we have is coming from, not to take it for granted, to be part of Jewish history, and therefore part of Jewish future.
This Parsha also mentions the sin of the golden calf. Can you tell us about that?
It is true, it mentions the sin of the golden calf and the second tablets that we received afterwards. And I believe it is connected to the very same message, and that's why this is part of this Parsha, which apparently is unrelated. How come the children of Israel sinned with the golden calf? Just 40 days earlier, there was this amazing event. The Torah was given. They heard the voice of God from heaven. How come 40 days later they can take this calf that they have created and say, these are your gods of Israel? Does not make any sense. But I think it's the very same reason. What they got in the Mount of Sinai, they actually did nothing in order to attain that level. Because just 50 days earlier, they were still in Egypt. They were idol worshippers. They were slaves. So they went through a crash course of understanding God. Just 50 days. It did not hold water. They've seen something. It made the impression, but they were unable to internalize. And therefore the tablets shattered. Everything they had just shattered. And they had this sin of golden calf, which actually brings them back to where they were before they left Egypt. Now, we need to do the second set of tablets. And there's one major difference. The first one was done by God. The second one, God tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Solecha, you should make this second set of tablets. Now you have to work, internalize, make it something of your own. And that is exactly the message. We've got so many things from God. But when the time of independence comes, we need to create our tablets, which will always remind us of our destiny, of our values, of our destination, where we came from, and where we're headed. So it's very interesting because in the ark, which was placed in the tabernacle and later on in the temple, there were the two sets of tablets. The smashed one, the shattered one, which were made by God, and the second set of tablets, which were full and complete, but were made by a human being, by Moshe Rabbeinu. And it's a tremendous message. Whatever God gives us is not enough. We have to internalize. We have to make it something of our own. We have to remember, and then it becomes real. And therefore, the second set of tablets, that's a real one. Like, again, what we had in the desert, we should never forget what we had in the past. All Jewish history, thousands of years. But that's the secret of our eternity. The ability to remember where we came from, to remember our core values, and therefore, always to see the future, to strive and to dream about the future. And thanks God, we are now part of the future, being back in the land of Israel, just as we see now in our weekly portion, the option of exile, but obviously the final scenario of getting back to our homeland.
Well, it's a powerful message. Thank you so much for coming in, Rabbi.
Thank you, and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.